We will move back into open session, and I will go ahead and read the statement on discussion and information items. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And our first discussion item tonight is an update from OPN on our high school project.
So we'd like to welcome Roger Worm, Vicki Highland, and Kristen Hurt with OPN. They're going to give us an update on the design progress that they've made so far, that we've all made so far on the high school.
Good evening. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you to the board for finding time on your agenda for us tonight. It's always important to check in, let you know what's going on, and we've been busy for the last 8 or 10 weeks since we kicked off this project, and we'll give you a quick update. It's about a 10 or 15 minute presentation, but it's a good time to check in. Which one is it? So the schedule, and we don't expect you to read this from those screens. I don't know what you see in front of you, but we're mapping out the overall project from where we started in April to where we will end up summer of 2022. It's about a 50-month total time frame. We're about 2.5 months into it, so we're around 5%, I suppose, complete so far. We've been conducting programming meetings, and we're just now starting with some conceptual schematic design level drawings, and Vicki and Kristen will bring you up to speed on how we got through those exercises. Our look ahead. After tonight, we have community meetings later this week. We'll be meeting with, it's like an open house, neighborhood type meeting. We have 3 of those sessions planned, and it's just a great opportunity to get more input from the community, understand what the thoughts are, and how we can apply that moving forward through our design. The next steering committee meeting is June 21st. Then our programming document, we intend to be basically wrapped up towards the end of June, and then we'll present that July 9th at that meeting. With that, I'll pass it over to Vicki and Kristen, and they'll walk you through our next steps.
Hi. So we've seen some of you, a few of you, more than we've seen everybody, but we've had some really, really good time spent with your district. We're really excited about where we are today. I think when we interviewed with you and the last time we talked to you, we talked about how important programming was, because that's when we really get to know what's going on in the district. We establish that project vision by how we talk and who we talk to. We work with stakeholders. We meet with a lot of stakeholder groups, try to be inclusive of all parties that are going to partake in the success of this project. And we do the research. We look to see what you have now and what your community is saying and what's out there. And then we, of course, do some benchmarking. And we think that the more successful we are at this effort, the more successful the project will be.
So far, we have met with quite a few people. We've met initially with the school board. That was probably, about 6 weeks ago or so, when we talked about your collective vision for the high school. We've met with students, both in kind of a round table with them, as well as an open invite to any student wanting to come and give us feedback. We did that with students, I guess that was last week. And then just today we had a meeting with all of the faculty. Again, it was an all-faculty meeting. We presented a lot of our progress to date and invited them up to participate in some visioning exercises, as well as just kind of stuck around for them to visit with us if they wanted to provide any feedback. In addition to that, we've met with 10 different departments from the high school, kind of covering a broad range of topics to get all of the nitty-gritty, the specific details of rooms and sizes of equipment that they have, and try to gather as much information from them as we can to inform the size of the building and the number of rooms we would need. We've also had our kickoff meeting with the pool user groups, including the swim coaches as well as the Ames Athletic Club. And then we've met with Jerry and his staff, talking about from a maintenance and mechanical, electrical, plumbing aspects, what kinds of things we'll need to consider for the building. As Vicki said, we have meetings on June 7th with the community and 3 sort of open house type sessions for people to come and just visit with us about what their vision is for the school. And then we'll also need to circle back around and talk through some technology and AV kind of items to get our programming efforts wrapped up.
So now we'll talk a little bit about our benchmarking and trips and what we've done. You saw the exercises that we did with the school board where we had a school should and how and why and what, and we did our visioning dot exercise. We did that with all the stakeholder groups that Kristen talked about, but another real important component to programming is benchmarking, going out and actually seeing what's out there. So we took a trip, we've taken a couple trips. One was a 2-day Minnesota swing where we hit 7 different high schools in Minnesota in 2 days. They were 2 full days. We learned a lot. We asked the people that were attending both what they saw that they liked and what they didn't like, because we feel it's really important to see that both inform us and tell us how to program going forward. And then we also did a fine arts tour over in eastern Iowa and looked at a few performing venues so that we could work with that stakeholder group and kind of see more in person and see them react to spaces. We had some big takeaways. It was kind of fun to kind of put these together, and we've summarized these in about 5 slides with some photos of some of the spaces that we saw. One of the big takeaways was the academic pods and the teacher collaboration spaces. And what we saw was, and Kristen, you described that really well today, in kind of a concentric where you kind of ring these spaces out and you provide opportunities where teachers can collaborate in a teacher collaboration space, but then they can have outreach spaces where either students or teacher to student or cross-disciplinarian can meet and work on academic areas, either in project-based learning spaces, or they can make better use of classrooms by pulling people together or scheduling independently. So kind of forming these spaces around different collaboration opportunities, whether they be within what we called the fishbowl in the lower right-hand corner of that photo. We all really loved that when we saw it.
And I think with collaboration spaces, it's very important to have a variety. So, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and that's what we saw in a lot of those schools, was providing a good range of different options for students to study and for teachers to teach.
Mm-hmm. What was really exciting about this, and actually it was really exciting when we were doing our stakeholder meetings, when we were hearing from the teachers, they were excited about the opportunities and the ability to have future opportunities to work cross-disciplinary in project, in dividing or delivering curriculum, math and science together, or math and English together, or whatever that might be. We saw some really cool things, and we heard some really cool things from your staff. We also, one of the big takeaways was being flexible and adaptable, and that's both in the spaces that we design as well as the furnishings that you put in those spaces. Making the spaces really flexible and open, and ability to form groups of multiple sizes doesn't help unless you make the furnishings also flexible. So we saw a lot of that on our benchmarking tours, and we all reacted to that positively.
And also spaces that can be used for different purposes as well. Finding ways to multi-purpose spaces is important.
We also talked and learned a lot about branding. Schools and high schools in particular feel very strongly about their school colors and their branding, but there are opportune moments to do that and be really powerful in how you do that. We saw lots of spaces that when you got to the athletic areas, maybe your common areas, you'd see a lot of branding. And we want to have a high school that you walk in and we know this is Ames High and this is what it looks like. But in some cases that can be really overdone, and it's nice to have kind of a variety and do it purposefully so that you can involve other aesthetics into your buildings. Especially like that middle picture with that great big tiger. We figured that was probably how long?
maybe about 50 feet long
50 feet long.
in the end zone
Yeah.
of their stadium.
So when you're out in the stadium, you would look into this glass and it would light up and you would see this tiger like overlooking their stadium end zone. So it was kind of just kind of a cool branding.
And really the most important thing is that people know they're at Ames High when they're here and that this space looks unique.
Another takeaway was we have to, when you're designing a high school, it's not like an elementary school. It's not like a college building that's designed for English, say. It is, you're designing all those spaces into one building. So you're designing a chemistry building, and you're designing a family and consumer science building, and you're designing a band room and a gymnasium. And you have to look at all those spaces and be very intentional and really own those spaces and really get to know what those users need and how they deliver their subject matter. So we spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different spaces in all these buildings. So I think one of the biggest takeaways was just that having that holistic approach is the best approach to designing. Everything from the curb appeal, we talked a lot about curb appeal when we drive up to schools and we would say, you know, you obviously know exactly where that front door is and where you're going in, and you want that to be an attractive place. Look at how you use spaces. That top middle picture has that area under a stairwell. This photo doesn't show it in use, but spaces like that at schools we visited, spaces like that were all over, and kids were gathering together, and they were socializing, they were learning, or they were working independently, and it was really, really neat. You see these little collaboration zones. You see a greenhouse here. So it was just making sure that you look at every opportunity within a school and make it attractive, kids want to be there.
So as I mentioned, we've met with quite a few groups already, and through those process, we've asked people what a school should. And that's been our kind of main question that we've asked all of the user groups that we've met with. So this is a graphic that illustrates what has been the response from that question. So it could be anything from what a school should be, what a school should have, things like that. So we broke it up first by the different user groups that we've met with, different stakeholder groups. So when we initially met and had our visioning session with you guys, safe was the overwhelming response. So as you look at the text size on all of these, the text responds to how many times the word was used. So the text that's larger has been responded to more times, and then the text that's smaller came up in the meetings, but it wasn't said as many times. So you can, looking across between the school board and faculty, safe, engaging, and pride are some of the biggest text items there. Among administration, we see welcoming and having an Ames brand. And then among students, overwhelmingly, we've heard a lot about sustainability being a priority for them, something that's comfortable, and also Wi-Fi and food, of course, which kind of makes sense. So when we took all of these responses and put them together, these are the words that we heard most among all of the respondents. A school that's safe, a school we can have pride in, one that supports collaboration, a school that's open and welcoming, sustainable, accommodates flexibility, and has natural light. So these are our guiding principles for this building design.
So that's what we have for you tonight. That's kind of where we are in a really rapid fire.
So our next steps are, as Roger mentioned, we'll be closing out the programming process here in the next month. By the end of June, we'll have collected all the data we need to support the initial space needs analysis. We'll be working with Story to confirm the budget on that, and we'll be back to you on July 9th to review where we're at with that.
Yeah, the program essentially lays the groundwork for us to right-size the building. It's every space, how big, how many of those spaces, and that really gets us on the tracks to start designing, and that's our next step. So you'll see a lot happening here in the next month or so. Do you have any questions?
Great. Thursday, you're going to have 3 meetings with the opportunity for community members to describe real quick what somebody will experience and how that'll be organized
Yeah, sure.
for those meetings.
So it'll be very similar to the exercises we had you guys participate in it. One we call the image inquiry, or the dot exercise, where we have a series of images on the wall, and we ask people to put red or green dots, red for if they don't like it, and green for if they like that image. And they can add notes and put information on there about what they like and don't like. That helps us kind of see and understand what people's baseline is for things that they're really gravitating towards, whether it be the way something looks or maybe a feature of the building that they see on the print. And then the other exercise, we're going to take the community through the We Believe a School Should. We think there's one sort of missing group yet in this set of vision, and that's what the community's feedback is there for those words and what we hear from them. So those are our two main exercises for them. In addition to that, we'll give them a little update about the process, where we're at right now, and the schedule, just kind of what you've seen tonight.
And we plan to do those in an open house environment, so we'll actually have a greeter there from our company who kind of direct people. There's 3 different stations, and we'll have 3 people, one at each of these, so people can just move at their own pace and give us feedback.
Well, that's great. It sounds like it's going to be interactive, and that I think people will very much appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you.
One question I had, and I guess the first time the board has heard it, SAFE is clearly something that's top of mind for everybody. And with everything that's happening in the United States, I'm curious if there's any validity to having, first I guess the question is, what's your experience in making sure buildings are as safe as they can be while in welcoming? But then would there be any validity to having a consultant that would specialize in this to be able to look, one, at the design, but then also more importantly, operationally, that we're doing the right things to protect our staff and students? So I'm just kind of curious to throw the idea out there to have you respond to that, but then what guidance can you provide the board on moving that forward?
Sure. Right now, we have a placeholder for a security consultant, and we're right in the process of looking outside of our area here for some people that might be top in their field for that kind of advice. There's some different places you can go for help, like Homeland Security and some other agencies that can help, but I think we've talked about looking into hiring a third-party consultant to really help us through that, both operationally and in the design of the school. It's a critical and important piece of the design of this school.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that there's so much attention now just zeroing in on that topic alone. And as you can imagine, people are coming out of the woodwork, raising their hands, offering that level of expertise. And we've been giving it a lot of time to go through and understand where's that right person, where's the right folks that we want on our team for this. Not only geographically, but also from an experience level, because it goes beyond just the high school. It could be a shopping mall. It's any kind of a public place, a government building, whatever it might be. And what we're finding is there's a very broad range of experience. We want the folks that have the absolute most that is directly applying to what we're doing here.
So would that come in through schematic design, or at that time frame, when will that start?
Yeah, it's schematic design, okay. Absolutely, because we want to understand how we harden the perimeter of the building and have your stop points as you move through the facility.
So could you provide the board, I guess, an update, even by email, of kind of the decision you make of where to bring this forward and how that will impact?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm curious to hear about when we met as a steering committee, but then now, last week, what your meetings you had another follow-up meeting with some students, and then today when you provided that opportunity with faculty, I would just be curious of what was the involvement rate or the attendance, just how many, and then what came out of that? Did it emphasize the things that you had learned up until the point that you had those meetings? Did it shift some thinking? How did those 2 additional meetings shape some of the work that you're doing?
I think the student meeting was fun. It was a testing day, a finals day, so I'd say participation wasn't as high as we would have loved it to be, but the engagement that we had was just really speaks well of the school. We had a couple kids there whose passion is sustainability and what are you going to do for you know, to make sure that we're good guardians of the earth and good stewards. So they were fantastic. We had people talk about everything from food to lockers, and it kind of reinforced what the group, we had a focus group when we met with stakeholders a month ago, and so we had about 8 kids at that. It was almost 10. About 10 kids at that one, and then we had probably another 20 to 30 kids stop in last week, and they talked about, we asked about lockers, so we got feedback on that. We talked about they love outdoor spaces, that came up. A lot of things that reinforced when we were on our benchmarking trips and even talking to kids and administrators of those buildings, but a lot of things that you would expect. And the faculty, the whole high school faculty, I believe, were there. It was a meeting that they were scheduled for this afternoon, and they actually, we all hung around and they had some conversations individually with us, and they provided a lot of input. We haven't gone through all their sticky notes yet, but they filled 3 big pages, and so I think they had some really thoughtful considerations. It'll be fun to read through all those.
I'm curious about what we will receive from you, I guess maybe 2 or 3 updates from now. If I am in the future looking at a schematic of what the building will look like, will there be any indication of a feature that's there because the students wanted it, or this feature's here because administration asked for it? Like, how would we know why something's there? Like, for me, I would be interested to be able to see what people asked for represented on the charts. I don't know the fancy words for it.
Yeah, how do the words that have risen to the top get carried forward in design? Right. Really, I think the best way is it should speak for itself in good design. The program, obviously, is just a document. It's all verbiage. We take that and turn it into graphic floor plans, and then even the words that you see here or on the previous slide, you'll start to see that take shape, whether it's the exterior imagery of the building or security is, safe is the word. Pride, that's a graphic that could be mass and volume and space. So I think as we move through this exercise, you'll go from just seeing lines on a drawing that define rooms to seeing design that creates space and volume. It creates an environment. It creates an emotion. It creates character for your building. And when we get to that phase, when we get to that point in design, it really does speak to itself. And you'll see it in 2-dimensional and then 3-dimensional renderings as we move through our work. And you'll see that way early in the process, so there's always time for more input before we get too far over the next threshold where we can't turn and go back. That's why these updates are so important, critical milestones between all of us, and keep everyone connected.
Any other questions? So I just want to emphasize that the 3 community meetings on Thursday, Eric has advertised those, but those are an open house format. So if you cannot be there at the beginning to our public, please know that it will be a very comfortable space to come in too late, and you will not miss out on anything.
Just another plug for that. At the Ames Public Library, from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. And then at the middle school from 5 o'clock till 6:30, and then at the high school from 7 till 8:30. And so the middle school and the high school will be in the cafeterias.
Yep. And anyone, even students and staff, faculty, everyone, in addition to all of our community members, are invited. So it's your opportunity to come and meet our architects and give us some feedback. So thank you very much for being here and providing the update.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, yeah.
It just gave me time to think about the previous question. For some of these topics like safe and sustainability and collaborative and such, I understand for pride it'll come through in the design, but will your documents maybe have some sort of traceability matrix that would show here's where we have taken into account the safety aspects, or here's where we've taken into account sustainability, so that we can very specifically see that at that time to evaluate that question?
Yeah, sustainability, for example. We'll be doing energy modeling that will show you the numbers, the matrix of how the building performs as we move through the analysis of different systems, the building envelope, compare that to energy consumption, so on. And that's technical engineering. It's a lot of math that gives you a deliverable that tells you how things are performing from a sustainability standpoint. From like the security standpoint, that's an understanding of how this building functions. Everything from front doors, from windows and sight lines, and how could someone move through a building without encountering barriers, and then conversely create barriers to slow down movement through a building. It's documented through all of our discussions, through meeting minutes. We know what the discussion was. We know what the decision was to move us forward. And if somewhere, you know, in the next round of meetings we have to change course a little bit, we'll understand why. That way, when the project's done and open and we have that ribbon cutting, we know what took us there, how we got to that point in design and in construction.
Well, thank you very much for being here and all of the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public on our update from OPN? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to our next item on the agenda, and that's the report on the receipt of bids.
I would like to introduce Tim Oswald from Piper Jaffray. He, along with Ron Peeler from Allers, have been my rocks through getting these first set of bonds issued. We did all the preliminary board action that needed to advertise for bids and to have bids come in today at noon. So this is Tim's second trip up to Ames today. So he is going to go through the results of the bid that we received electronically today at noon.
Okay, so I think you have my summary in front of you of the bids. First takeaway is that it's quite boring, frankly, which is good. Boring is usually good in my industry.
So the report of sale is on the second agenda item that you'll be considering this afternoon. So it's on the updated resolution. Because that's where it said to attach it.
The statement.
Sure.
Oh.
It's the colored one.
So unlike in construction where you would advertise and bidders would physically show up with a bid in their pocket, in the bond world, it's entirely electronic. The bids are submitted electronic system. It's a web system, and I make a permanent copy PDF of everything that was on each of the screens, so we all have a record later of what we saw throughout the transaction. The law still does contemplate that bids could be submitted, and so at noon somebody could have walked into the superintendent's office and delivered a bid. It had been the first time I would have seen that in more than 25 years. I mean, it's really not typical anymore, bond world, for a physical bid. But so the bids were submitted, and we did receive 3 bids. Winning bid coming from United Missouri Bank out of Kansas City at an average interest rate of 3.05%. And that's colored a little bit blue, if you can see if the color's coming through. Does everybody see that? Okay, so then if you scan down, the second place bid from Northland Securities at a 3.07. Third place bid from Robert Baird out of Milwaukee at a 3.28. Let's see, to point out a couple of items first, go back to United Missouri Bank's bid, and you'll see a lot of 3% interest rates. And a number of you have probably not been through this process before, and so let's take a minute and understand bond math versus mortgage, which is how most of us deal with a lender. On my home loan, I have a fixed interest rate and a balance that's due, and every month I pay the balance due multiplied by the interest rate and then the number of days in that month, and that's how much interest that I owe, plus then a scheduled principal payment. In the bond world, you'll get to a similar place, but we do things a little different. And so what we typically do is each scheduled principal payment, so there are 20 of them, can be sold to an investor. And that principal payment will have its own interest rate. So when you calculate the interest that you're paying on the bond, we tend to talk about it in averages. It's easiest to contemplate we're going to pay 3.05% on this loan today. The investor who bought the bond that's coming due, for example, in the year 2019, is going to earn an interest rate of 3%. And if you then compare down and you see the very last one, the investor who bought the bond due in 2038 is going to earn an interest rate of 3.5%. So let's stop there. Remember, when you go to a bank, they used to have rate charts. I don't know if they still do, but it would say 1-year CD at this rate, a 5-year CD that rate, and then typically the rate is higher the longer you tie it up. Bond people are the same way. The longer a person is tying up their money, the higher an interest rate they're going to ask for in return. So now you get into some of the little gimmicks that the bidders play when they're trying to sell an issue, to buy and then sell an issue. United Missouri Bank, while it's a big national bank, their primary business today here is to buy the bond from you and turn around and sell it to many different investors, or maybe just a few, but to sell the bonds to somebody else who will then own them hopefully for the life of the issue. Does that make sense? They're not buying this for their own portfolio as a deposit or an investment. They're acting in a brokerage capacity. So they have to, in their minds, we have to win the bid. And so they take the steps necessary to win the bid. But they also have to be able to sell the bonds to their clients. So obviously if they quoted an interest rate of 1% today, they would have won the bid, but they would be selling the bonds at a pretty significant loss because the market's above 3. If they had bid 4% in a 3% market, they wouldn't have won. Does that make sense? So they're trying to balance, what do I have to do to win, with how can I sell the issue? Back to my boring story. If you own the bond in 2019, if you were the individual or institution that bought that bond from United Missouri Bank, you're going to earn 3% interest for about a year. Now, the feature here is that United Missouri Bank is charging that person more than face value to buy that bond. We call that a premium, and I'll come back to that. They're actually net going to earn 1.8%. Now, the person who bought the very last maturity, 2038 at 3.5, they're actually earning 3.25. Almost every single one of the payments was sold at a premium. Now, so back to my mortgage. When I did my mortgage, the broker said, would you like to pay a point to buy the interest rate down? It's a math calculation. It's a fairly simple way to figure out, and by the way, it's 6 of one or half a dozen for most people, but it's psychological. If you can buy the rate down, you can, in theory, also buy the rate up, right? It's the reverse of paying a point. In this case, that's what's happening. The bidder is paying you almost 2 points, actually, to buy the rate up to make it a little bit more saleable for them with their customer base. So it's all, I'm kind of numb to whatever strategies the bidders feel appropriate or fine within certain parameters. For example, I wouldn't want them to have quoted an interest rate in 2019 of 20%, because that would have affected the tax levy that we've already approved. So within parameters, what strategy they need to do is their choice. And it will flush out when we calculate what the actual interest cost is over time. The broker, the bidder, is going to pay themselves a fee. They charged just a hair under $40,000 for their time and effort, and they're paying you $5.1 million, but you're selling them $4,995,000. So you're getting paid almost 2 points. Now let's stop there, because I just said something that maybe is not what's on the agenda. The agenda says $5 million. And we will always reserve the right to change this schedule after the bid is received. And then we have a process we go through, and the bidder verifies that they agree with our calculations. And in this case, when I got the rating agency fee quote, there's a fee break where the fee goes up if you're at 5 million, but if you're at 4,995,000, the fee is different. So, and the up is $3,000. It's not a huge number in the scope of the project, but I don't like the relationship between paying them 3 and getting 5 total. We're only getting 2 out of this thing. That doesn't work. So Chris and I visited and just simply said, let's reduce the issue by 5,000. We'll pick it up later when we sell some of the rest of the issue. And you won't pay the rating agency that extra $3,000. So the reso set is written with 5 million in it, but then if you go through the fine wording, it actually says 4,995,000, and that's the reason why.
And if you recall on all the previous actions, everything, and you probably thought it was odd to read those motions, but everything was to not exceed 5 million. That's the reason why.
Doing okay? So on the little box on the right side, right above the yellow line, it says as resized. The issue size is 4,995,000. The average interest rate there on the far right, 3.048%. Now if I could stop and point out the obvious, the first place bid and the second place bid were very, very close. And that's as I would expect it, by the way. But it's nice to see that. Third place bid was a little bit of an anomaly. Wouldn't normally be that wide. Almost 0.2% is kind of a wide spread. But the first 2 were right on top of each other, as I would expect. So.
Tim, you had talked today about that you had originally, when we put this out to bid, expected interest rates of around 3.25, and there were some things globally that happened that benefited us. Do you want to maybe just comment on that a little bit?
Well, so remember that the U.S. is the place where people send their money when people are in the world when people are worried, and then of course the U.S. is the place where people take their money when they're comfortable with world events, and I kind of jokingly said money flows have been positive into the U.S. for the last couple of weeks, and it's been a gift from the Italian folks who seem to have a dysfunctional government, and it's scaring off people who are investing in the southern part of Europe. And so what do? Send the money here. And where do you put money when you send it somewhere? You buy bonds, you buy treasury bonds, you buy something. And so rates today are 0.25% or so lower than they were 2 weeks ago. That can go the other way just as fast. So I would rather be lucky than smart.
I probably wouldn't have pointed it out if it had gone the other way.
Now, I used 4 when we modeled this out, by the way, just out of an abundance of caution. So we are well underneath so far. Now we've got a lot of bonds yet to sell, so a lot of time between now and when we're finished. If everybody's okay, the bids were submitted accurately and in compliance with the terms, and we would recommend award to UMB. And you'll take that up on, I think it's agenda item 16.
Tim, what's the schedule, I guess, for more issuances the rest of this year?
For selling bonds, or?
Correct.
So this amount should get you through the design schematic, all of those work that Roger and his group have just talked about, and get you to the springtime where you're starting to know, all right, what are we building and how fast and when, and once you've got that identified better, I think you'll want to start selling larger chunks of bonds. Right now I have it penciled with no input from your design team or Jerry. I just penciled out 3 issues, 19, 20, and 21. I'd really like to spend a lot more time with them and then ultimately with you. We kind of need to let them do their thing. You'll have there are some IRS rules you've got to meet to spend the money, and so selling 100 million today would have been probably not the best choice in terms of IRS compliance.
So because we've had activity going on even before the bond vote, I've got expenditures in fiscal year 18, which ends June 30th, that I couldn't end the fund negative. I would have either had to move those to sales tax or PEPAL because I couldn't have the capital projects fund where GO debt goes negative. So I worked with Tim, and it seemed silly to issue $1 million. So we chose $5 million, knowing that would get us through pretty much the next year. And we have 24 months before we have to start worrying about arbitrage and so forth to get proceeds spent. And I knew we could get the $5 million spent within 24 months. So that was kind of my logic on where I landed on $5 million. But it was mainly because I couldn't let the fund end in the red on June 30th.
So how much room do you have for being bank qualified? I mean, will there be any issuance then in early 19? Is it fiscal year?
We won't issue again in 18.
It's calendar, not fiscal?
It's calendar, not fiscal. So
okay.
if we felt like there was a real value to bank qualification later this year, we could sell an additional 5.
So you have 10 million, correct?
You have 10 million, correct?
Okay.
And you haven't sold that I'm aware of anything else this year, so.
So is there any way to prepay it to try to lock in rates and get 5 more million to be bank qualified as this calendar?
There are mechanisms to hedge. You still have to comply with the statute, which requires you to solicit a bid. So we would be doing a formal bid process to put in place some sort of a hedge. The problem today with the hedge, I'd love to figure out some way. I suspect you're nervous about where rates might be, and that's a logical nervousness. I'd love to figure out a way to hedge that. But most of the hedges that are available, you make a commitment that on this day you'll sell this amount of bonds. And so you're kind of jumping the gun versus where you are with design development when you enter into the hedge. So you're I'm not sure you're quite ready, even though I'd love to find a way to hedge against rate movement.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Any other questions? Thank
Thank
you
you
for the information.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Any comments from the public on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to Nicole Coons and the extended learning.
Well, thank you for having me this evening to talk a little bit about our extended learning program. I'm Nicole Coons, I'm the district coordinator, and I'm pretty excited to be here. To begin with, this is just an overview of our program and the model that we follow. So the Ames Community School District utilizes the MTSS model, where services are targeted and data-driven. You'll notice that the services become more intensive as the triangle moves upward. This allows ELP to support classroom teachers by looking at student need and serving students in a variety of delivery models. The foundation for this triangle is the multiple criteria identification system that you see there at the bottom. It includes, but isn't limited to, our elementary stretch think data, our comprehensive assessment plan data, including IO assessments, benchmarking, and end-of-year assessments, teacher recommendation, which includes classroom teacher and ELP teacher, and then at Ames Middle School and Ames High School, we also have parent observation forms that are a formalized parent inventory. At the elementary level, we have 3 full-time teachers serving 5 buildings. They're serving 217 students at the 4th and 5th grade, which is around 29% of our students. This is done through pull-out groups in humanities, math, and science. Those pull-out groups happen once per week for 45 minutes in each of those areas. K-3 services include teacher collaboration, stretch think lessons that are whole class lessons where teachers go into the classroom, administer lessons to those students, and then collect data from them. It also includes flexible pull-out groups The number of students that we work with at the K-3 level is a little bit difficult to calculate just because those flexible groups do vary so much, but we do know that our ELP teachers have contact with each student at that level just on the basis of their push-in work that they do in the classrooms. We also offer additional contests that are open to any student. So Invention Convention is offered to all 5th grade students. That's held in January. We also have the Elementary School Quiz Bowl that's facilitated by some of our high school students that's open to all 4th and 5th grade students. At Edwards and Sawyer Elementary Schools, Mr. Royer is doing some great work with girls' STEM groups. He's coordinating with some volunteers to bring that opportunity in, and they've had some pretty large numbers at both of those buildings this year, which I think is really exciting for them. In grades 6 through 8, we have 3 part-time teachers working to serve 367 identified students. That's about 33% of our middle school student population. These students are receiving services in the form of pull-out groups, push-in groups, teacher collaboration, things like that, in math, science, and humanities. Again, once per week is the model there. They also have the opportunity to participate in special contests that include AMC 8 and 10, which is a math contest, Scholastic Art and Writing, Science Fair, and National History Day, just to name a few. Students in 7th and 8th grade also have the opportunity to participate in Seminar. Seminar allows the chance for students to work a little bit more on their research skills, learn a little bit about growth mindset, academic honesty, things like that, while also extending some of their interest areas that they might not be able to push in the classroom. At the high school level, we have 2 half-time teachers, myself included, serving 342 students in grades 9 through 12, which is about 24% of our population right now. Those services include ELP Freshman Seminar, sophomore conferences, sophomore study center, internships through a partnership at Iowa State, AP online courses that are open to any student, not exclusive to ELP, and then future planning, essay writing, and some work with students around just executive function skills, organization, study skills, things like that for students that may be struggling a little bit. Additional things that we offer include Super Summer, which is coming up starting next week. We're really excited to have 31 different courses offered this year and a great variety of courses, so a lot of things for students who are interested in STEM, but also students who might be interested in learning a new language. We're going to have a course on Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, which I think is kind of fun for those kids. We have just under 300 students enrolled as of today, which is a great number for us. We also offer a parent group that's open to any parent of a student at any grade level in ELP. That parent group is facilitated by Ariane Schmidt. She's the ELP teacher at Meeker and Mitchell Elementary Schools, and Jane Staniforth, who's a retired Ames Middle School ELP teacher. This group really just seeks to help support families with students that are gifted with techniques, just building a little bit of camaraderie with other families that may also have a gifted student in their homes and may struggle a little bit from time to time. Outside of the district, our entire department attends the Iowa Talented and Gifted Conference each year. That's really important, I feel, for our professional development, staying current and knowing what else is going on within our state around gifted students. This year, we had 2 presentations from Ames teachers at the conference. One was on Twice Exceptional students, just sharing our journey through coming up with some plans to help better serve our Twice Exceptional students. The second was on developing a high school program. We'd like to reach out and help support schools that are just sort of beginning that process of developing a better high school program. I'm also a member of the Department of Education Talented and Gifted Leadership team. That includes some members of different university organizations, other school districts that are a little bit larger and have kind of lighthouse programs. This year we've done some really great work focusing on creating task forces around issues facing gifted students in our state. The task force that I've chosen to be a part of researches and recommends different things to better identify students from underrepresented populations. I'm really excited about the work that we're doing, and our goal next year is to get some official guidelines out on the DE website to help other school districts in their journey. We were also invited, myself and Laura Ballantyne, to a Twice Exceptional workshop that was held in Cedar Falls this spring. We've done a lot of work, again, I mentioned before, kind of a journey through finding ways to better serve our Twice Exceptional students, and we were asked if we would share that with other school districts that are just starting that journey as well. So we presented there, and I think had a pretty good response. We've had a few schools reach out after that point asking for a little bit more guidance from us. Which brings me to my last item. We do consultations occasionally with other school districts. Again, just people that might be beginning their journey, school districts that are curious about acceleration processes, which we of course help facilitate, different things like that. So we've actually had about 4 as of today. We had someone else reach out where we've just answered questions for them, done some video conferencing so that they can ask a few more questions and just help other school districts try to improve their gifted programs. When I began in this position 3 years ago, I administered an evaluation of our program to determine areas in need of improvement. We have an excellent program in place, but we have a desire to continue to grow and learn to better serve our students. So over the course of the past 3 years, we focused around the following. The first was to develop a Twice Exceptional plan and more specifically focus on a referral plan so we could better document which students are Twice Exceptional and how we can better meet their needs once we have those students identified. The second is to strengthen the identification process utilizing more equitable measures within our program. While there is no federally recognized definition for Twice Exceptional students, each year we're learning more and more research is coming out, which I think is really exciting for us. In 2015, we started a committee that was formed just to build capacity around understanding Twice Exceptional students and learn what our needs were as a district for better supporting these kids in the classroom and outside of the classroom. From there, it was determined that we needed a more concrete plan, better resources for our teachers and staff members to identify these students. Laura Valentine and I, who's a behavior coach within the district, worked together to develop a referral process, some observational documents, things like that, that we could begin this work on. This year we implemented those tools, and the two of us together worked on utilizing those with students that were referred to us so that we can personally have that experience and see where we need to tweak and improve the process. Next year, we're hoping to resume the work with the Twice Exceptional Committee with the goal of developing a handbook that can serve as a resource to teachers, students, and parents. That resource would include our referral form, the work that we've already completed, but would also include a mission statement, suggestions for ways to work with students in the classroom, recommendations if things aren't working in the classroom, what are next steps to take. We're really excited to begin this work in the next year, and we're hoping to have a good representation of not only ELP teachers or behavior teachers, but special education, counselors, general education teachers, so we have a pretty broad view of what the needs are and what the experiences are of those individuals. Our next goal has really evolved somewhat, but the core has kind of remained the same. It's really to strengthen our identification process by utilizing more equitable measures. When we first began this work, we started just by evaluating our current process, taking stock of what it looked like, as well as who those students were that we were actually identifying at this time. It was determined that we were not identifying proportionally to what students are represented in the district. At that time, we began to seek out what the cause of this concern might be, and that first step was really locating what barriers were preventing students from gaining access to ELP. We focused on data points that needed improvement. So there were some data points that were a part of our process at one time that not all students had. Perhaps a teacher recommended that a student take a test, something like that. We loved to have the data because it showed how high the student could go, but it wasn't equitable because it wasn't available to every single student. So as a result, we eliminated those data points. They're great anecdotal data for us to understand how to work with that student in the classroom, but not necessarily to gain access to ELP. Therefore, trying to reduce the possibility that a student may be at a disadvantage because they weren't offered that assessment. And then we identified that we really needed to add additional data points. After we got rid of some of those assessments that weren't offered to every student, we didn't have a ton left. So really we wanted to look at what were the recommendations in other school districts of the National Association of Gifted Children, what were the things that we really needed to add. And all of those things kind of pointed to a universal screener being added to our process. That's where the ability test pilot came into play here. So we focused on that idea of the universal screener. We set out to find recommendations, research, and real-life experiences from individuals who were utilizing universal screeners as part of their process. What we found was the use of an abilities assessment containing a nonverbal component specifically would best fit our needs. We identified 2 assessments, the Cognitive Abilities Test Form 7 and the Naglieri Nonverbal Abilities Test Form 3. We were fortunate enough to pilot both of these assessments in grades 3, 5, and 7 this past fall. We identified the above criteria, you can see that right there for yourself, examining first how many students still qualify for services when the data was layered with our identification process, the overall percentage of students identified if this assessment were to be used in isolation completely, the percentage of each subgroup identified using this assessment in isolation and when combined with our identification process, and if the assessments were showcasing us similar or very different data than what we were already seeing from those data points that we have within our acceleration process. The results were quite surprising to us. It actually showcased that both the NNAT3 and the COGAT-7 were identifying the same population of students within our district. So essentially the 2 tests were finding those same kids, which is good, but also not quite what we were expecting based on the research and what we were being told by other school districts. So we went back to that assessment to determine which one would provide the most useful data, not only for identification, but then also to provide applications to other programs, the acceleration process, and to help classroom teachers better know their students. The NNAT3 provides a nonverbal score only, while the COGAT-7 provides a nonverbal score, a verbal score, and a quantitative score. All of these can be used in isolation, or they can be combined in any way, including a cumulative score. Due to the volume of data available, we are recommending that the COGAT-7 be adopted for use in the 2018-19 school year in grades 3 through 8. This item will appear as an action item on an upcoming agenda. Don't quite have the date yet, but hoping soon. The next steps here, really the adoption of this assessment is only the first step. We are not there yet, but this is a great start for us, I feel. Having that additional data point there that is a universal screener, it's allowing all students to have that same data point will really strengthen our process a great deal. As we move forward into this next year, we want to continue to work towards creating a more equitable program through training and professional development with our teachers to be more culturally conscious when working to identify and recommend students as we advocate for those students as well. This work will be especially present next year in our professional development, designed and supported by Dr. Spikes and Dr. Swalwell, who we've consulted throughout this pilot process, just to get a second set of eyes on this work. As we work to build capacity in this way, we are also dedicated to ensuring the data that we receive from this assessment is supporting our work to build a more equitable program. Evaluation will look at the success criteria that we've previously shared, but really focusing on the underrepresented populations to determine if a universal screener is really fitting what we would like to see, and with our goal of creating a more equitable program. If it's not, then we have further considerations to make, and we are consulting with Dr. Spikes as well as a few other experts in the field as to what those things might be. The third prong in our next step is really to evaluate our teacher recommendation process. We want to strengthen that process and ensure that all teachers are providing recommendations to all students. We know that teachers can be great advocates for their students, but we want to make sure we're structuring that in a way that doesn't allow for some inadvertent bias to come out. Perhaps I forgot a student's name. It can happen, and we want to make sure that it doesn't. We're also considering tools such as the HOPE scale and the Slocum-Payne scale as a possible screener for our students as well. This takes a little bit more consideration just because of the size of our school district, and again, making sure that we're administering this to all students. I really look forward to presenting further information to you on our universal screener, the data that we've gathered from that next year as we look forward to really implementing that, and then also our work with teacher recommendations. That's about all I have. I kind of rushed through some of that. Any questions?
I have some questions.
Okay.
Mrs. Coons, thank you for doing this. This looks like a lot of work. So you've been working on this for 3 years now?
It's about 3 years.
Okay.
Research and consultation and yeah.
Well, thank you. So I guess I had some questions about the procedure, and maybe you can just help me understand if they're still relevant. I know, because it sounds like it's going through transition. So with the procedure you talked about, I think you used the words multiple criteria identification. Is there a rubric that's used?
There's not currently a rubric that's used.
So there were, what, 4 or 5 criteria?
Yep.
So if a student has any one of those criteria, they can access ELP services?
We look for 2 or more.
2 or more, okay. So there's something.
There's something in place, so there's
Okay.
a guideline like that, but there's not necessarily a rubric at this time. That's something that we're definitely looking at as we look at our identification process, but we started with eliminating some of those measures
Sure.
first.
Sure.
And now we're focusing on how we can tighten the rest of that
But do
back up.
you do perceive in the future that there will be some rubric or
My hope
standardized?
is to have something more concrete that's available on our website so that families have that information right out in front of them rather than just the list of criteria they're looking at, something that helps them understand a little bit better.
Okay, and so do you perceive that whatever that rubric is, that those criteria would be weighted in any way, or would they still be equal?
Might be a little bit premature for me to
Okay.
say for sure.
That's
I
a
would think
unfair
some
question.
categories would be weighted. We've had conversations previously about what categories would be weighted, but right now with limited data, it's difficult to do that.
And so whether or not the board approves this measure, you would work on that?
Yes.
As part of the process? Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you have any sense for the board about the number of students who, once they are identified, do they fall in and fall out? Do they get identified and they stay in through the end? How does that work?
We don't have hard numbers on that right now. Most students who are identified do stay within the program. We do re-identify students every year, so we examine their needs each year. Occasionally a student may show kind of an anomaly year where they really bubble up, or they do the opposite and they kind of fall out. And what we do is just monitor those students, monitor that growth or that fallout to make sure that we're meeting their needs. But it's on a flowing basis, trying to examine what they're actually needing within their classroom. So there may be times where they aren't pulled out of the classroom quite as frequently, just because that's what we're seeing within the data, but we keep in contact with classroom teachers to ensure if there is something and that assessment data that we were looking at is incorrect, we can still serve that student's needs. So it's very flexible in some ways, trying to meet the needs of those students.
Is the district tracking the students who stay in versus students who fall out? Do we have a way to know if there's an unequitable process at play there?
I'm sure there is a way. It's not something I currently have data on, but I'd be happy to look into it.
Okay. And then I guess I wanted to understand, I appreciate the presentation. I didn't actually see all the results, or maybe I was expecting something different, because you talked about the COGAT 7?
COGAT, yep.
And you wanted to know if you still identified the students you were already identifying, if you're identifying new students, and then what subgroups of students are being identified. I didn't see those numbers.
No, basically what we were doing was have a comparison between the NNAT and the COGAT, trying to see which assessment would fall into those criteria. So which one would accomplish all of the criteria that I named, and they both did that. So that's when we fell back to what else are we going to be looking for. So I didn't include that data here, mostly because we were doing a comparison of the two, but that's again something I could get for you so that you could locate that.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're telling me. Could you explain that again?
So what we were doing with the pilot was really to determine whether the NNAT 3 or the COGAT 7 was the assessment that we were going to go with.
Right.
So that success criteria that we identified, we were really looking for, okay, is the COGAT or the NNAT going to achieve locating the subgroup populations that we're hoping to see and improve disproportionality there.
Did it?
They both did.
So we didn't see those numbers. Did you present them?
I did not.
Okay,
Nope.
but you have them?
Yes.
Can we have them?
I'd be happy to share that
Okay,
at a later time.
Okay. So what the numbers then will tell us is that it identified students that were already being identified, so we're not missing people, and that it did then I guess, significantly then identify students who we were otherwise missing?
Did not significantly. It highlighted for us some over-identification of students. It also showcased that we were locating the right students, that those students that were performing in the top 2 stay nines of both the NNAT and the COGAT were also scoring in the top assessments or the top tiers within our identification process as well. It did not greatly improve our disproportionality, but it did somewhat improve. So we were finding a few more students, but not greatly.
So do you know, just off the top of your head, I know you'll get us those numbers later, do you know which subgroups, that's an awful word, by the way, do you remember which particular subgroups we saw spikes in?
I can't even call them spikes. We were within 1 or 2 students.
Okay.
As we consulted with Dr. Spikes regarding that, because that was a big concern about whether or not we move forward with any of this.
Right.
All of our research says a universal screener is definitely a needed data point. If you consult the National Association of Gifted Children, if you talk to experts in the field, if you look at other school districts around the state, a universal screener is a part of their process. So when we didn't see significant spikes, especially in that nonverbal score in our subgroup populations, which I don't like that word either, I apologize, I keep using it. As we examined that a little bit more closely, one of the things that he mentioned is that there are opportunities for us to look at this data in different ways, but we would need to have a longer evaluation period on the assessment. So really with the limited populace that we were testing, we maybe didn't see the entire picture, but we saw enough of a picture where we could make a recommendation on the assessment. But we would want to move forward with an assessment and really evaluate what that looks like in year 1. And that's kind of what I alluded to in my next steps, is going through an evaluation year, again, examining the same criteria that I mentioned before, but also looking at specifically those underrepresented populations that we're seeing right now, and whether or not in the first year where all of these students in grades 3 through 8 are going through the assessment opportunity, whether or not it improved those numbers or if we still weren't seeing a change. If that's the case, then there are a couple of additional steps that we have that we could potentially take to see if that improves our numbers at all.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, my brain's a little fuzzy at this point. Other questions?
Any data or feedback from parents, how we're doing with this program?
We didn't get a lot of feedback from parents. We got some anecdotal feedback from students who actually enjoyed both assessments. At least that's what they told me. It's possible because I was the teacher or proctor in the room. They were giving me a little lip service, but there were some fun aspects to it. It's a test that's a little bit different than what they've experienced before. So there are puzzles, there are things that look more fun than maybe the bubble sheet that's associated with IO assessments and other standardized assessments. We did garner feedback from the proctors, just gathering a little bit about ease of administration, technology, but also their experience with the students, if there were frustration points, anything that really upset the students as they were going through the testing process. And really all of the feedback we got was very positive on both assessments.
And then based upon the program and your presentation, it sounds like the focus is from 3rd to 8th grade, and also we have quite a bit of support at the high school level. Do we have adequate enhancement opportunities for K through 2nd grade?
It's definitely a possibility. There could be an opportunity. It's not an inexpensive test. So really targeting 3rd through 8th grade was the goal, because those are really some critical years for identifying and re-identifying students. That's not to say that K2 couldn't be a possibility in the future, because it would be valuable data at that level as well. But this was targeted mostly to work on that formal identification process.
It feels like, I know the focus is on literacy during that time period, which rightfully so. It's just that for kids that maybe have mastered some of those beginning skills, to push them, I guess, in more meaningful ways, I think would be helpful, just as you're reviewing your program.
Absolutely. I'm very open to it.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to say thank you, because it seems to me it's a very responsive plan in terms of addressing twice exceptional, having a goal with better addressing the needs of our twice exceptional students, and then to have a better system so that we can improve, so that we don't have underrepresented populations, that we're providing a more equitable opportunity. So I appreciate that you're willing to go there when it's sometimes tough to go there and put yourself in that vulnerable position. I think that we need to be okay with that. And it's okay to show that data and say, let's look at this, let's dig into it. So thank you for being willing to go there, and what are the ways that we all can ask those questions so that we can dig in and figure out what are the ways that we're providing the kinds of experiences we want to provide for our students. So thank you for providing the leadership and continuing to be a part of the conversation with us, as well as reaching out to those resources that we've identified within the community to support us in this work. So that's why we're in that contract with those folks. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Nicole?
Just want to say thank you very much, and just a short question. In the pilot, 3rd, 4th, 7th, about how many students participated, and was it all buildings?
All students and all
Okay.
buildings in 3, 5, and 7.
Got it, thanks.
Yep.
Anything else? Thank you. And any comments from the public?
Just a quick comment. I'm Gail Seiler, 420 Briarwood Place. ASAT, the Ames Youth and School Action Team, as you know, has been concerned about these racial and ethnic disparities in ELP and other advanced tracks and courses for a while, as long as we've existed, really. And I want to thank Nicole Kuhns for her efforts in this regard. After she presented this at the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, I sent in some questions and got some additional information from her, and then during the time when we were waiting in here tonight, we had the opportunity to talk more about it. And so I appreciate her attention to this problem of disproportionality. But I just wanted to make a few comments. It just seems odd to be considering a test that did not significantly identify new students, that basically reproduced the selection of students who are already in ELP. And I don't know the answer to why that is when that's not been the case in other uses of this in other contexts, but it just seems odd to be considering that the implementation of a test to address a problem that it doesn't seem like that test will address. But maybe I'm missing something in the thinking there. But more importantly, we're concerned about the whole process, as Nicole mentioned, because it's likely that each element in the selection process, whether it's assessments, benchmarks, teacher recommendations, et cetera, parent questioning, parent suggestions, it's likely that each of those elements has bias built into it, and therefore each of those elements needs to be reviewed so that the bias can be managed and dealt with in a systematic way. Therefore, we hope that if you decide to add this additional assessment, that in addition to that, that you still stress the need to look at all the rest of the process and identify the other ways that it can be improved. And the other screenings that Nicole mentioned, Hope, and I'm not sure of the name of the other one, might be something that would yield more diversity in who's brought to ELP. So I just have some apprehension that adding COJAT 7 will create an illusion that the problem's been solved, that it's been addressed, when it really hasn't. If this new assessment is added, we think it's important that we see that only as one step in mending an inequitable selection process. And I also would say that Ms. Kuhn's efforts in reviewing this process highlights the need to do this for other processes, to similarly address the process by which students are brought into AP classes and honors classes, and between the 3 different tracks in the science program. Because in all of those areas, there are misrepresentation of African American and Latinx students. So we hope that this is the beginning of looking at more deeply at this process and more widely at the other processes. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. See no other public comments, we will move on to the technology update with Carl.
I'd say there'd be some significant irony if the tech director couldn't get his slide deck to show up on the screens.
I was going to say, we have some high expectations with the technology right now.
I need all the help I can get. I'm going to have my helpers that stuck out here to be a part of this as well introduce themselves real fast.
Sarah Davison, Instructional Technology Coach at Ames Middle School.
Patrick Donovan, same thing at the high school.
So I had Patrick and Sarah here tonight to kind of answer some questions and field some questions as we go through tonight's presentation. You guys have had access to the slide deck for a while. I've updated a little bit, but there are some links in there that provide some significant information for you as directors as well as our community as well. So tonight's State of Technology kind of annual report, we really want to focus on some of the new stuff that we have going on in our buildings and in our classrooms. We really want to hit some of the highlights about accessibility and access for all of our students. And I specifically capitalized all of that. It's become a really important focus in our district about trying to reach all of our kids regardless of where they're at, and we see technology as one more piece to help succeed there. Whether it's different backgrounds, different abilities, things of that nature, and so that's kind of where we're going to look at things tonight on how these tools help bridge some of the gaps that we have. Also want to give you guys a heads up on some coming attractions. I did bring some show and tell items. I guess I should have had them out earlier, and the people that were here could have played around with them while we were waiting to start, but they'll be around at the end if you do have some questions about those devices. I want to hit real quick, remind everybody of the vision and the goals that we set out when we first started down the road with one-to-one devices at the high school. So we're 5 years in to that. And so we wanted to try to create these 21st century learners that create, collaborate, and communicate. We wanted to work to eliminate the digital divide among our community and our students. We wanted to personalize learning for our students centered around individual goals and needs. We want our students to become good digital citizens and use digital tools for academic and personal learning. I'd like to think we're doing a pretty good job at that. Case in point, Google for Education actually came to visit earlier this year to visit some of our classrooms, both at our middle school and our elementary schools, to see how we are leveraging some of these tools and technologies in our classrooms. We visited the 8th grade technology exploratory class, one that's only 2 years old. We'll revamp that course significantly and are going to continue to improve that class. We visited a 7th grade math class, which was quite an experience because they wanted to interview the teacher, so I stepped up to substitute for that 7th grade math class. For those of you that don't know, I used to teach social studies, so math was a long ways out of my comfort zone however, because Robin did such a good job and the way she manages her classroom and the way she has it all set up, I could easily step in and go alongside the kids and help them out. She's truly leveraging technology very well in that building. I know Sarah's been working with her some of that as well. We also visited 2 classrooms at Edwards Elementary, kindergarten and 1st grade. We didn't pick these buildings for any other reason other than their geographical closeness. Because Google wanted to see how we're leveraging these Chromebooks in the classroom and what apps we were using, and I wanted to try to hit as many classrooms as we could. So doing the middle school and Edwards seemed to make sense. There are links to the case study and the article that Google has published based on their visit, and it was a very, very interesting experience to see professionals coming in to see how we're leveraging these technologies in the classrooms. From designing things in Tinkercad to laying out math practice to working with the magic pencils, I believe is what they're called at the elementary school level. They had little styluses that they were using on these particular devices in a couple of the classrooms that we visited, as well as some of the work that Mrs. Green is doing in her makerspace there at Edwards, and seeing some of the work the kids are doing in that particular space. So where we are, we're 5 years in at the high school with MacBook Airs. We actually are going to be evaluating devices this next year for purchase then in July of 19. We always want to reevaluate every single cycle so that we can determine that the device meets our curriculum needs. One of the nice things about the way we're able to operate here is we start with those educational goals first, and then we find the tool that best fits those needs. And that's worked out very well for us as we've done that. At our middle school, we just refreshed with a brand new device. It's actually this device here that I use every single day. I use the exact same device as our middle school students use. I found it to be a very, very powerful device. I love the device. I love the ability to have a touch screen, to use a stylus, a world-facing camera. And so I kind of remind people when I go around that, hey, look what the technology director is carrying around. He's carrying around a Chromebook too. Yes, it really is a real computer, I promise you. So I really make a big deal out of that. One of the things that we didn't do this year is we did not hand out these styluses, and I'll be the first to admit when I make a mistake. And this was one of those mistakes. We didn't hand them out to the kids because I thought they were too expensive to replace. Because I promise you, the folks that I'm looking at this morning, or right here, aren't using the same pencil right now that you did this morning, or the pen that you used this morning. So the idea of handing out an expensive stylus to a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader and expecting them to have them at the end of the year kind of freaked me out a little bit. So we had classroom sets, math, art had classroom sets, and we had some available for checkout at the middle school library. And what we found is we're actually doing a significant disservice and hamstringing these devices. They're not as usable without the stylus. So I spent some time and bought a large number of styluses from Amazon to see which ones would work. First thing first is I actually cut one of these apart to see how it worked. And then we started finding ones that we could. And so I found some rather inexpensive replacements. So we can start handing out to these kids in the fall so they can fully take advantage of annotation and writing directly on their screens. So they have multiple ways to input information into their devices. One of the things we talked about is that 8th grade tech exploratory. I'm going to have Sarah talk about it just a little bit, if that's all right. Some of the stuff that we have going on up there.
Okay, so students currently in the 8th grade tech exploratory were exploring things relative to the robotics, 3D design using Tinkercad. They were doing some computer science and coding. They were also taking kind of the approach of deciding some of their passions and researching and exploring things that they wanted to learn about in relation to technology. And Mr. Lodermeyer and I worked together in his last year, and so I got to experience that in his classroom. Some of the main hits were when he did Wednesday challenges, which was a lot of makerspace type things where the students got to create. He also led stations, and so students would be able to work with the green screen, create videos, and collaborate with their classmates while working with technology in his course.
Sarah's only been at the middle school for 1 year, so she got kind of thrown into the deep end there. And so she's been working really close with Mr. Lodemeyer as well as a few other staff at the middle school in her coaching position. The other thing that we did most recently was we offered a boot camp for some of our staff. It was completely voluntary, and Patrick helped head that up, so I'm going to let him give us the elevator pitch on that one.
So this was kind of part of the TQ process where teachers can do that, outside the workday type of learning. And there's actually a good number of school districts that are G Suite or Google Suite districts that offer this, where they can get, we have teachers who are using Google Apps very well. We have some that really want to learn more about them. So this is a way that we're trying to be a flexible learning designed on whatever needs they had. And Google actually has a certification process, level 1 educator, level 2 educator, and then a trainer, and then an innovator too. And so this is the first step for our teachers to get some of the level 1s. And so we had anywhere between 16 and 20 teachers in this throughout the 5 periods we set up in this boardroom actually. And then those who have gone on to take the tests to get the certifications, we're going to recognize them on our district website in a couple different ways. You can see I kind of did a little model there with my certifications, but just kind of recognize those teachers who have shown how well they can use the Google Suite of apps.
One other thing, you guys walked past the digital signs out front here and probably not even noticed really what they are. We've actually expanded that digital signage to all of our buildings now except for the high school. The high school still is using a pretty antiquated system. They still have some digital signs, but we're going to see this sort of work going into that new high school and leveraging some of these things. It's a great way for us to highlight the work that's going on in the school. I think Eric took the opportunity to make me look bad by switching out all the really cool images that I put together the last 2 years with something that's significantly more professional than what we have out there now. So the other thing that this gives us is that some of this is customizable by our buildings. So at the middle school, Tanya Goodwin was working with a group of kids to come up with images that represented their building, represented themselves, and represented who they are. So they threw pictures into a folder, and those pictures then could cycle through on those signs, so they could see not just their work, but they could see themselves, they could see their culture, they could see all sorts of things that they valued within their building. The other thing that we're going to be doing is working with BEC. I know Vicki Hales has been up here a number of times talking about her collaborative work and what her kids are doing. And one of the things we're looking at is taking all of the Hall of Fame pictures and all of that that's in the gym and digitizing that into a touch screen. So if I want to see maybe some video highlights of Fred Hoiberg or pictures of famous swimmers that we've had, or et cetera, they can go through and do that, and we don't have to have all of the space devoted to pictures and images. Also can be available online as well. So we're going to see more of that. The big crux of this evening is when we started designing our classrooms, we wanted to try to dig into how do we make that classroom work for our kids, work for our teachers, work for the different learning styles. We've selected furniture, we've selected desks, but the biggest, most important piece, Darcy and I have worked very close in the time that I've been here, is the idea that every single one of our classrooms is outfitted the exact same way. There's no reason that a gen ed classroom should have any more resources when it comes to technology than a special ed classroom. Now, a special ed classroom would probably have some little more customized things that might need that a gen ed wouldn't, but we wanted to start out with that same kit of parts. Same for our ELP, same for our ESL, same for our Success classrooms. So all of our classrooms in our elementary schools all had the same set. They have projections, or they have a large screen TV, they have an amplification system that students that maybe don't have hearing issues could hear better, but also if we do have students with hearing issues, we can actually connect their devices into that system so they can better hear what's going on when the teacher is giving instructions. But the idea is getting all the information to our kiddos the best we can. As part of a PEPL project, we're kicking off a 3-year project for the middle school to start getting the classrooms up to speed at our middle school now that don't have these particular tools, because now our middle school has, or our elementaries have them, the high school has had them courtesy of foundation money, the middle school doesn't, so we're going to start working through that as well. The other thing is getting a device in the hands of every single kid. Every single kiddo in this district, from kindergarten through 12th grade, has a device that is quote-unquote theirs to use. We just did laptop collection at the middle school and the high school. Sarah got to go through that for the first time. That was quite an interesting experience, I'm betting. And the idea was we want every kid to have that device, right? The reason we have the devices that we do is they meet our curriculum needs first, but also these devices have a large number of accessibility tools already built into them. I don't have the time tonight to get into every single one of these, so I provided links to further documentation on this slide deck. It's part of the posted agenda, so community members can look at them as well. But something as simple as converting colors on the screen, maybe to a negative, would make it easier for a student to be able to read it. Being able to flexibly change font sizes, font face, zoom in, zoom out. All of these tools are built into every one of the tools that we provide for our students. We also don't stop them from making those changes. If a student wants to change their Chromebook to their native language, they're welcome to change their Chromebook to their native language. We don't stop them from doing that. We also want to have those accessibility tools. Now, when the kids found out that they could turn the screen reading on and it would read in a voice, some of the teachers wigged out initially, but they got done playing with it for a little bit and they got it out of their system. But in that case, the benefit outweighed the negative. The other thing that the Google Chromebooks have added to the picture is the touch and the stylus. Something that dawned on me a few years ago, the act of using a mouse over here to control something on my screen is very, very bizarre. You're like, why would I wiggle this over here to make this doohickey over here do what I want when I can just touch the screen? You look at kids interacting with these devices, this is why we chose this size device, is it's easy for them to manipulate, to touch the screen, to work with the screen, and interact with the device in a more natural manner, to try to avoid some of those things that get in the way. A couple of the things that we also do is additional software and Chrome extensions. One that we did purchase a little over a year ago is one that's called Snap and Read Universal. Snap and Read, at its most basic, is a screen reading tool. It'll read any of the text on the screen, and this tool is available to any of our students, K-12, when they're logged in with their school district account. Where Snap and Read really, really excels, please make sure I don't forget anything, is that it will also make text easier or more difficult, depending on your students' choices. So I, as a classroom teacher, might know that you have a little difficulty with this particular text. I can tell you to increase or decrease the readability of this particular block of text. And it will show, it'll take the difficult word, swap it with an easier word, but the more difficult word remains there, so you can see both of them. It also, does language conversion for students that wish to read text in a native language of their own. Not only will it convert the print, but it will read that to them in their native language, and it will level the text in both English and their native languages, and it will show the more difficult word and the easier word within that paragraph. I took a really quick screenshot to give you guys an idea of how much this particular tool is used in our district. We're over 10 million, almost 10.5 million words read to our students using Snap and Read. It also does researching, and I would have loved to have this tool in graduate school because I click a button, it does APA for me, and it puts it right where it needs to be. I don't need a manual to have to go through that anymore. But this tool is one that we felt was important. Darcy and myself, Patrick, Dr. Ross, we did attend an event to learn about this tool, to be trained in this tool, and then we try to make sure we train up our special ed staff. We've met with the instructional coaches to make sure they know how to use it. We send out instructional videos to our classroom teachers because now it's summertime, right? So now we take everything away. However, all of these kids still have their Google sign-in. So if they do have access to a device with a Chrome browser on it, they have access to these tools. So they can use Snap and Read this summer. There's nothing that says they can't. Some other things that we have available to our kiddos, Open Dyslexic is a font out there that is, in some cases, proving to be more readable for a student with dyslexia. We don't push it out to those kids. We make it available to all of our students. You're welcome to add this font if you think it makes it easier for you to read. Beeline Reader is another text reading tool for our students. AT Bar is assistive technology bar, and that just provides some shortcuts for our students to get to a variety of different things: font sizes, font color, contrasting color, screen changes, so students can develop the ability to use these tools to leverage for their learning. A number of the tools that we provide do OCR, which is optical character recognition. So if it's a picture I take of a teacher's notes, I can throw that into Google Keep. It will translate it into text that I can then have in a Google Doc. We have a number of ways for dictation in Google Docs and in emails where a student can read to their computer. The biggest difficulty is getting students to realize they need to insert punctuation when they speak, as we don't speak using punctuations, period. We also have swivels available for evaluation in our buildings. I'm going to have Patrick hit on that just a little bit on how we're leveraging that because I don't want to take up too much time.
One thing I'll add about the Snap and Read is that it has OCR functionality built into it too, which is great because we have a lot of teachers using some older resources that are not digital, but they may scan them using the scanners we have in the buildings. And this will actually just allow you to take kind of a snapshot of it and then read it and still highlight the words as it reads it to the students. The swivels are really great for teachers to use, especially people like me who have hearing issues. If you're doing like a whole class activity, you can easily record. It has a great microphone for that, so you can easily get that video back to the students so they can rewatch it if need to. And if you publish that video to YouTube, also YouTube has auto closed captioning, which you can easily edit to make better fit for your students. So it's actually the words you said. If you're like me, you don't enunciate, you need to fix the words. Pretty much all these resources, I've been curating them on a Google Doc and sharing them with staff, just because it's been a big focus for me this year too. I've been presenting at conferences about this, but the list kind of keeps growing and growing because there are a lot of needs for students and there are so many tools out there that can fit those needs. To give you kind of an example of that, when I was in elementary school, I had a hearing aid so I could hear, but yet these tools are all free and readily available, whereas my tool is very expensive. So it's much nicer nowadays just give these kids the tools that they have 24/7 access to in order to help them better learn.
One of the problems that we still have, both perceived and in reality, is access when they're not at school. We could give kids devices, and yeah, the devices are useful when they're not at school, but they're not as useful as if you have internet access. One of the things we always want to do is try to figure out how to communicate. So I got into Infinite Campus. Actually, I had Kathy Fitz run a report for me, and we have 40 households that currently do not have email in Infinite Campus. So it's 0.007% of our households that don't have email. So it's a very small number that we don't communicate to via email. Because of the move to online registration, we've really gotten a lot of email addresses that's really helped kind of up that communication for us. Now, the homes without internet access, we do a survey every year. It's called Bright Bites, going to our staff and to our students, 3rd through 12th grade. It's a self-reported survey, and we don't get 100% response rate. So right now, it's about 5% of the students that respond say they do not have internet access in their home. What the survey doesn't do a very good job of is defining what internet access is. Is it internet access on a mobile device, or is it internet access on my laptop? Is it, you know, what's the difference there? I don't have a way to differentiate that. The other thing we've done is we have tried to build out and get the student-friendly Wi-Fi locations. Businesses in our community that have offered access in their areas, in their businesses, so students can take advantage. On the map that I have linked here, the orange dots are our school district facilities, all of which that have Wi-Fi available, but you can't always get into our buildings. We've managed schedules, opened up the high school earlier, that sort of thing to get access. However, the blue dots are currently the student-friendly Wi-Fi locations. We have some gaps here. Some places in, geographically speaking, in our district where I would like to see some more. So one of the things that is kind of on my list for this summer is to go out and try to drum up some business. It seems like everybody has Wi-Fi. Why not allow our students to use it? The other things that we have going on is, for those of you that don't know, there is a group of community members here in Ames called the Ames Community Internet Initiative that I am both a member of as a community member, but also as a representative of the district to see how we can leverage possibly getting to the point where the City of Ames provides internet as a municipal utility, similar to what Cedar Falls has done, to see how we can maybe improve internet access for our students when they leave the schools. We also have started to work with and advertise the everyoneon.org program. Eric did up some flyers for us, and we're going to give these as business cards to our counselors, our homeschool liaisons, as they work with families to give them access to cheaper and discounted, not just internet access, but also if they want to have a device, those are available as well. One of the programs involved with Everyone On I really like because it's a cellular device. So if I don't own a home, if I don't rent a home, if I'm a transient individual where my living arrangement is very different from week to week, a cell card, a little mobile hotspot would be much more useful. The other topic that's going to be hot topic this next year is whether we allow our students to take devices home over the summer as opposed to collect them. Because it seems very odd that we would provide a device to a student, give it to them for 9 months out of the year, and then take it away for 3 months. Now, there is a lot of things that we need to consider before we do that, but I think it is worth evaluating. It's a topic that will be taken up at our level, as well as the technology committee, as well as business administration, and get some of their input. We would not be the first district, even in the area, to allow students to take devices home. A couple things on the coming up. Just want to hit these really fast is we do have some device refresh coming up in the summer of 2019. Some of you may know that there are some computer science standards currently in draft form circulating at the state level. If those do get approved, they would not be required standards, they are recommended standards. So myself and the C&I department is going to be working very closely on how we can adopt and maybe address some of those computer science standards. There are some PD funds, however, there is no funding right now earmarked at the state level to pay for a teacher to teach these. It would be, we would have to train a teacher or hire a teacher and then train them to teach these standards. We are going to put a significant push on SAMR and TPAC over the next year as well. I'm not going to get into that really deep, but I did cite both of those there, and it's about technology integration at a very, very powerful and useful level that goes beyond just babysitting the student in the corner or maybe is an electronic worksheet. One other thing that's going to be taken up is the 5th grade transition. There was conversations early on about starting to allow 5th graders to take their devices home after winter break to help ease their transition to 6th grade. So it's one less thing that they have to learn about. They don't have to worry about learning about a laptop and a moving schedule and how to unlock my locker and all this other kind of stuff. So that's a conversation there. I would very much like to take the opportunity to thank the tech support teams that the district has, our technology teacher librarians, our tech coaches, as well as the IT staff there. And Cheryl Robson, the TTL at the middle school, will be retiring as of tomorrow at noon. And on the way out, just parents and community, remember we have a number of ways to stay informed. From our website to our social media, we have an app that you can download both on iOS and Android, as well as both a print and a digital version of the amazing magazine. So that wasn't probably as short as everybody wanted, but we took the times off the thing, so I didn't know when to stop. So what questions do you guys have for us?
The refresh process, when are you going to start that for the high school?
We are going to start evaluating devices right away at the beginning of the year, so we can select the right device come summertime.
So start evaluating in the fall and then
with a purchase at the next summer.
In the spring?
Yeah, yep.
When you evaluate, this just dawned on me, do you look at it at all, those devices, as we are also building a high school? And is there any interaction, or is it, no, these devices are completely separate? I know you're thinking technology for the new high school, but in terms of that refresh?
The biggest thing is the Wi-Fi infrastructure needs to be really, really good in the new building, because we're not going to go back to desktop computers for every kid. So whether it's a tablet, whether it's a Chromebook, whether it's a MacBook Air, whether it's a $2,000 Alienware gaming PC, Wi-Fi is the big deal. And so the device isn't as important as making sure the building is able to use the device's power and that sort of thing.
I'd like to thank the group of you for the presentation. It was really impressive. I think that the district has done technology really well. And I appreciated that you were so thorough and talked about all of the options that are available to our students and to our teachers, but also so incredibly mindful about equity and accessibility for students. And not only have you gone through all of the trouble to identify the tools that are already available, but you have empowered the students to decide which tools meet their needs. And so I really appreciate that. This was very good, and I appreciate it. You know, I at least hear lots of complaints sometimes, and I've never heard a complaint about technology, so I'm gonna knock on some wood now.
The Chrome extensions you're using for accessibility, I'm assuming they probably require internet access, correct?
Not all of them. The Snap and Read is pretty self-contained, where it's limited, not having internet access, is the number of voices that are available built in. So you can change, obviously, I want Sally to speak to me, or Timothy to speak to me, or Julio to speak to me. There's a lot fewer without internet access. And the ones that just change the environment of the screen, how it looks, that sort of stuff, those don't require internet access either. They also don't send the information off. That's one of the reasons we paid for Snap and Read, is that it doesn't send it off somewhere to be put on a database to be evaluated and then sent back. It's all done without access to that sort of stuff. So that the student's information is kept very, very secure.
And both the MacBook Air and the Chromebook do have built-in. It's just that the Snap and Read is much more powerful than what's built in.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Any comments from the public about the technology update? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to Principal Schroth and Lawler.
Good evening, I'm Brandon Schroth, the principal at Fellows.
And I'm Sue Lawler, building principal over at Sawyer.
Tonight we wanted to come and report back to you on a pilot that began this past fall. The purpose of the pilot was to elicit feedback from students, their families, the staff, with the possibility, although this wasn't piloted, but the possibility also our community as a whole. And so this tool, Panorama Education, was one tool that was identified as a strong possibility to employ and see how it might be useful in eliciting student voice, family voice, as well as our staff voice in improvement efforts within our system. So Sawyer Elementary and Fellows were willing to pilot this out. And so the process began in the fall, like I said, October. Both of us attended a virtual training to learn more about the tool, the history behind the tool, and how the tool was developed, as well as how data can be analyzed within the tool. So when we employed the survey, we were able to bring the data back and analyze it in multiple ways. Late October through December was round one of the student, all 3rd through 5th graders responded through the student survey, and the reason why it was 3rd through 5th grade is because through their reliability work, they found that 3rd through 5th graders perform better with the questions than kindergarten through 2nd grade, mostly because of their understanding of the question and their ability to read and process the question. Staff and then families also had the opportunity to respond to the survey. Following the survey, each of our staffs engaged in some level of analysis, and then in the spring, the surveys were re-administered again to the same groups. So tonight our purpose is to review why use student surveys, what does the research say in regards to surveying students specifically, and what is our school or district doing this year, and then an opportunity to ask questions. So why use surveys? What the research supports is that students have an invaluable insight and are the true experts about their own experiences within the system. And so getting their voice as part of the evaluation process is helpful when identifying areas that we may need to improve. Surveys give students an opportunity to have their voice be heard in a more wide view way, but then also making sure that if we do move forward with this, being able to identify ways to perhaps have some focus group work or open-ended questions within the system for students to work within. And then the survey results can be shared to inform goal setting at the building level, the system level, and then guide self-reflection and help our schools improve.
And with the reliability and validity, that aspect that we kind of took a little bit deeper look at, it did involve, the samples include substantial subgroups of multi-grade levels and racial groups, and also significant populations of the English language learners, as well as native English speakers were included to help ensure that reliability and validity was there. As far as what the research shows, you'll have the chance to take a look at that. The student surveys serve as both valid and reliable, and the climate and relationships can promote the healthier school improvement, as Brandon was making reference to, and also allows us and the school leaders to provide that feedback on the wide variety of students' experiences across all components of the building. Another component for us to take a closer look at that with the research is the effective classrooms when the students really do have the opportunity when they are completing the surveys. They know what a good classroom experience is, and so they were able to give that feedback that does help us move along. Also, the Panorama survey was developed through a rigorous survey design, which included the literature review, the cognitive interviews, expert feedback piloting, and the continued refinement. There we go, back up there on the slides. Sorry about that.
So next we want to talk about the topics and questions that are on the Panorama Student Survey. So the Panorama Survey, student survey specifically, was a collaboration project with the Harvard Graduate School of Education as they were working to vet the questions. Schools can choose from the bank of questions some 20-plus survey topics, and then there's multiple questions underneath each topic that measure different aspects of students' perceptions. It includes two versions, one for students grades 3 through 5, and then another 6 through 12. We specifically piloted the 3 through 5. And then there's also translations in over a dozen of languages. It's a simple drop-down menu, and then it translates the survey into the language. It has been used by 1 million plus students in schools and districts nationwide. And it's, again, as I said, it was developed by researchers at the Harvard Graduate School and Panorama together.
As far as some of the school climate, when you look at the school climate, students' perceptions of the overall social and learning climate of the school, here's a couple of examples of what those questions would look like. How fair or unfair are the rules for students at this school would be one example. Another for under rigor would be how much students feel that their teachers hold them to high expectations, and around the effort and understanding persistence and performance. And you can see the three different options of questions that were provided as samples there. For example, how much do your teachers encourage you to do your best? And then for the student-teacher relationships, another couple of examples, is that strong connection for social-emotional and students within and beyond the school. For example, how many of your teachers are respectful towards you? And those are all example questions that you can go ahead and utilize. One aspect is it does allow for us to have some open-ended questions. They have a bank of questions, and then we also have the opportunity to design questions and open response for our both parties, both the families and so forth.
Once you close the survey is organized in order for the site to begin to process and analyze the data. The data can be broken down into groups specifically, so you can see how certain groups are responding to certain questions. And so then they really recommend an improvement process as you look at that. So the first is that set a time for some self-reflection around the areas and really start looking at your celebrations, but also your areas that you want to begin to tackle and to begin a goal-setting process, discuss with the staff and students about the trends that we notice, and then plan ahead for future measurements. I think another benefit of this tool is they've built within it a playbook, so you can collaborate with people around the country around specific areas that they may have been lagging in previously, and they share their ideas of how they've worked to resolve some of those challenges. And so that is also another tool within the system. This was specific around the student survey. Within the suite of surveys, there's a family survey, same setup and makeup, a staff and teacher survey, and then a community survey as we shared earlier. So as we move forward, some questions that you may consider is how will the results be shared with our school community? How will the survey data be used within our school district? Where can we go to find more resources? to support us during the survey process, and then how will student survey be rolled out and affect their day-to-day experience within the school. Currently, we made it part of our 3rd through 5th grade guidance class. It seemed to kind of flow into that. It's an opportunity, a safe space for them to give feedback away from maybe their specific classroom teacher. So that's how it currently looked as we rolled it out this year. But those are all considerations. The next step for us is to share with the rest of the administrative team, but we wanted to come back to you because this was something that you approved to pilot early last fall.
Questions?
So, great. So your recommendation is that we go forward with it for the district-wide for next year based on this pilot?
At this point in time, I know Brennan and I reviewed our results and have gone through some with our families, and also Dr. Ross has helped us go through our data, and we do believe it is a powerful tool to enable us to get the voices in from all stakeholders. And so at this point in time, after we talk through this with our administrators, we do believe that it is something that is a benefit for us.
And Director Franzen, is this something we need to take action on, or is this going to be part of another?
Well, we can't tonight because it's
Right,
not
I know,
under
not
action
tonight,
items,
but
but we would.
It will come back.
It will come back.
We both had prior commitments to the next board meeting where that might be timely, so we moved ourselves up so we could share. Sorry.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
So is the idea if you move forward to only focus on the student, or will you also probably be looking at staff and teacher? Like, I think staff and teacher would be very valuable. Like in our company, I use this to find out everything, surveys like this, so.
Yeah, we really wanted to highlight the possibilities with the student. There are the same possibilities with the teacher, staff, our family surveys, and then we haven't specifically looked at the community survey, but I do think it would serve the same purpose. So we're actually excited about everything that we tried. There's also a social emotional learning tool that we did not pilot just because we were trying to make our work manageable and do what we were doing as well as possible. So that would be something, it comes with the whole package. That would be something that we'd be interested in diving deeper in possibly next year if we were to go forward with this.
Okay, so you didn't do the social emotional part, and that would be for the students, again, 3rd and 5th?
Well, interesting enough, the social emotional learning measures things like grit, perseverance, their growth mindset, and 3rd through 5th graders take that one, but K2 students, the teacher takes it through their perception of what they see the student doing. Because we wanted to manage how much we were doing, and how much we were having students do, we wanted to make sure that we started with things like classroom belonging, how students perceive classroom engagement, how safe they feel at school. Those were our beginning steps.
So you get to select the 20 questions. Can you adjust that from year to year? So you buy this package and you say, okay, this year we're going to do these 20, and the next year we're going to focus, maybe shift it just a little. How does that?
Yes, you can, and the nice thing is that we can target an area and then come back and do another survey. We were experimenting with that this year, but that would be something that we could even like target classroom belonging and then do a second survey later in the spring to see how did we do in that, just in that targeted area instead. So yes, that's something that we can definitely do and target it specifically for what we need.
I think some feedback we got from our families is they felt like the survey was rather long, and they really recommend not having a survey take longer than 15 minutes. They have an estimator based on the questions, how many questions you're selecting, that tells you how many minutes you're at. When we added the open response questions, the survey became much longer because open response questions take longer. I think also one thing that we saw is that it's hard to target all 20 areas, and so making sure that we get some baseline and then identify an area or a band that we want to improve, and then come back to that and then restart again. So I think being more purposeful with it is going to help. It's very overwhelming when you get that first report back and you're seeing within each of those 20 bands 5 or 6 questions and how students, families, and staff are responding to them.
One other piece that we got to look at is how we're going to have our families complete the surveys. Just between Fellows and Sawyer, our building representation of what that looked like. I had, as I worked with our Family Advisory Council and they looked at the survey, we had a number of families say it's hard to take on their cell phones, and that was their primary source that they had for the internet. And so we've got to look at what other options can we do to provide opportunities to take it in other formats other than cell phones, because that wasn't as friendly for some of our family members.
So anytime you collect information, you have to be ready to respond to the information that you have collected. Tell me about your staff buy-in on that process.
So I think it looked different at each building. At Fellows, we chose, our guiding coalition chose to kind of put this into the staff well-being, student and staff well-being action team, and so they were the ones primarily that were kind of digesting the data, and from that we have so one of the areas that we scored low student-wise was student engagement. When we looked deeper at that, it caused us to respond and look for ways that we could improve engagement by our students. And so that led us to having a core group of staff be trained on the instructional practices inventory, which measures student engagement and the depth at which we engage students in higher order thinking. And so that team has now trained the staff and has done one walk through the building where they collected over 100 samples of engagement, snapshots of engagement. And so we're carrying that work forward in the next 3 years to try to really deepen the level at which we're engaging students across our school day. So that's one example of how we began to respond to our data. Again, we focused in on one area and tried to go deep with it versus trying to move many points all at once. We know if we can engage students in deeper ways, the research is supportive that we will get better outcomes in achievement. And so that's one way to look at engagement, not the only way, but that was one way as we looked at our data that well-being action team kind of took forward. The other is the question that was given to students was, how much respect do you feel you get from your peers? That was surprisingly low. And so we've really looked at how do we build social expectations within the school, and how are we modeling those and interactively modeling them. And I would say the reason why we felt like it was surprisingly low is teachers looked at that. It's not something that they readily always see. Sometimes those things happen in spaces that an adult isn't always there, and so it's helping us relook at the whole picture across the day, and so that well-being action team is starting that work as well.
And we also had the IPI process. We've been collecting data now for 2 years, and so we were able to also work on the student engagement was an area that we were low in also, and so Brandon and I kind of did some processing of what that would look like. And we have been going in deeper with how do we impact that student engagement scores with those actual classroom hands-on activities and engaging kids. So that's something that our staff is trying to do more learning around so that we can have that impact. So those are all areas that across the board that we're trying to look at and move forward with.
I was able to take the survey. Actually, my family is a Sawyer family, so, and the first one was too long. There was a second one sent out. I took the one in Christmas, and I think timing was an issue. That was something that I heard from families, that timing was an issue. You said there was another one that sent out, and I saw you and realized I didn't fill it out, so now I'm bad. But I'm glad to hear you say that you have modified it to add an open-ended section. I don't recall that there was one the first time.
No, the first time we had the opportunity to learn some things.
Okay.
Of what we needed to make some adaptations with, even how it aligned with our classroom so that we could get different data, was conversations that we had had because we didn't have it specifically aligned with our Infinite Campus data to be able to go back and see our subgroups and so forth. And that was the first implementation. On the second implementation, we were able to now break it down specifically into those areas and be able to see how students are performing. So that's something that we're getting better as we understood the process a little bit more, but it's all been a learning curve for us.
But sure, yeah. I mean, you're the first out of the gate, so and I appreciate that. One of the comments I've heard consistently from parents and some of the teachers is that there was not an opportunity to provide comments, just like an open box comment. Has that been added?
That was added on the for the spring.
Wow,
that was added, and that's something that I think we have to navigate of how much of that, and then how do we do the wording and so forth. That's one of the nice aspects I think about the questions that are already created is that they're reliable and valid. However, that validity in things goes away when we start creating our own questions, and so that's something that we're going to have to look through of what we do. We need open-ended questions at each building, and what does that look like across the district too. So, but we definitely did receive a number of responses from families that said that was something we needed to include in all the surveys.
And I would say the company's been great because they would receive those directly and they would send them right to us. So we were getting the open-ended responses they were sending to the company and they would pass them on to us. Obviously, we worked with the company to make sure the next round of the next survey had open-ended opportunities in it.
And I know that Sawyer has the Family Advisory Council, which is amazing, and it gives families the opportunity to come in and see the data, because as far as I'm aware, it's not posted publicly. Is that right? Okay. What about fellows? How is your school sharing that information with the community?
We haven't taken that step yet. I think what I really wanted to make sure, we were adjusting to a lot of new things this year at Fellows. I wanted to make sure that that change and that adjustment was manageable as well for our staff, but also the students and the families. So we have not taken that step yet. It is something that we're looking at next year, is having kind of that opportunity within our school community. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for a thorough report. We appreciate it. Comments from the public on the Panorama software update? Seeing none, we will move to the public forum, of which we did not have anyone sign up to speak, so we will go ahead and go to consent items, and I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval of consent.
Second.
Moved by Deardorff, seconded by Rosser. Information?
Consent items actually will feature the minutes from May 21, the personnel report, and as I had told the board, or tried to make the board aware, you're beginning to see some of that 30% turnover from our EA staff as families move in and move out. There are several gifts to the district, including $312.26 from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Ames to the high school and middle school pantries, $500 in cash from Randy and Debbie Eckert to the high school softball program, $182 in cash from Collegiate United Methodist Church and the Wesley Foundation for the district homeless program. And over this past year at Meeker, the PTO donated a total of $12,143.63 to the school district for various things. All of these donors will be receiving a letter thanking them for their work. You also see that there is almost a final edition of the open enrollment by continuous it's a continuous application, and what we're really talking about here are students who have either lived in Ames and moved somewhere else and wish to continue here, or those who came into the district and wish to continue getting their education here in Ames. Last but not least is the agreement with the McFarland Clinic for the athletic trainers. A big thank you, I think, as part of that board agenda form that you see for McFarland Clinic. They actually reduced the agreed upon sum by several $1,000s to help us get through, get the training help and stay within our budget.
Thank you. It's been moved by Deardorff, seconded by Rosser. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. We'll move on to the action items. Item 14.
I move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Benken, seconded by Deardorff. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. Item 15.
I move the board approve the purchase of the recommended curricular materials for elementary ESL.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Benken. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. Item 16.
I move the board approve resolution directing the sale of $4,995,000 general obligation school bonds, Series 2018.
A second.
Moved by Deardorff, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion?
I just want to say it's still a great rate. I appreciate Tim saying he was using 4% as his benchmark for our budgeting purposes. So again, we're a full 1% below that. So appreciate Chris and Tim working on this in a conservative way. And I think the more we can try to lock in, the sooner the better with where the rates are going.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and proceed to vote on roll call.
Rosser, aye.
Benken, aye.
Deardorff, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Beerbaum, aye.
Passes 5-0. Item 17.
I move the board approve the substitute pay rates for 18-19 as presented.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Benken. Discussion?
I moved it, but I'm going to discuss it. And I'm doing this actually not only because I strongly believe it's the right thing to do, but also something that Director Briggs and I have brought up for the past at least 2 years. Our concern with the sub-pay rate has been that we do need to keep up. And we don't want to find ourselves 4 years down the road where we've stayed steady and all of a sudden realize that we've got to jump up all in 1 year. So it's really, from a budgetary standpoint, advantageous to start bringing it up $5 here, $5 there. So that's why I advocated a few weeks back that we start doing that. One of these years we need to start doing that. We talked about doing that last year. We talked about doing it the year before, but we can't continue to ignore that. The other issues that are related to this are also that many of our future teachers in our classrooms come from our substitute teachers that frequent. And one of the things that we always concern ourselves and we're looking at right now is the diversity of our teaching staff, and that's something definitely a concern. So in reality, if you don't have people that are being paid what they can get comparably to what they can get paid in the Des Moines metro area, which is significantly higher, $20, $30, $40 a day higher than what we're paying. If you don't make it worth their while to drive up 35, they're not going to do that. So those are kind of a mix of issues that I've talked about this. Doesn't look like we're going to do it this year, but I'd like to see us definitely look at that next year and start raising this pay for our substitutes. They do a great job for us when we have professional development for our staff, and they come in and in most cases take off right where the regular teacher left off from the day before, and we highly value what they do for us.
All right, been moved by Rosser, seconded by Benkin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Passes 4-1. Item 18.
I move the staff appearing on the attached list be reappointed for the 2018-2019 school year.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Rosser. Discussion?
I wanted to highlight one thing for the board. You'll notice that our administrators are at 1.5%. Everybody else is a little bit more than 2% from many of our support staff, only because the increase in our health insurance would have actually eaten up any kind of a pay raise. But I also wanted to highlight one administrator, which is Eric Smith. We did do a real quick kind of survey to find out that most of the schools our size are paying between $70,000 and $95,000. And with what Eric has been doing in this district over this past year, and also keeping in mind that the past board encouraged me over a 3-year period to make sure administrators were in the top 10% of those being paid in the state. Eric's increase is a little bit in excess of everyone else, $7,000 over this next year to try and get him up at least to Marshalltown, which is at $70,000, trying to get close to that. So I wanted the board to be aware that on a performance basis that trying to get Eric back up to at least where his colleagues are being paid was one of the efforts being made here.
It's been moved by Benkin, seconded by Rosser. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. Item 19.
I move the board approve the addition of 4 tennis court lights and equipment in the amount of $92,000.
I second.
Moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion.
Well, I've been the most outspoken critic of this expenditure, mostly because of trying to be cautious with spending money in anticipation of the high school. I've kind of come to a realization that the burden of taking things away from our students and staff needs to be greater. So when I was riding my bike past high school, I looked up and saw lights there on the tennis courts, and I know that there's been a desire to continue to have those courts lit for certain portions of the year, and so I'm in favor of adding this. Talking with Chris and our staff, you know, we have a contingency in place. I think we can fund it and cover this cost. It's just that I'm nervous about continuing to spend money when we have such a big project on the horizon. But I do want to support this request.
This is something that we've talked about for a long time, and we do need to remember that these funds, these Pebble dollars, the community supported overwhelmingly passing an extension to that last fall, and that's what these funds are for. They're to be used for improvements and in these types of facilities. So. Yes, we do need to be conscious of what we're looking at the high school, and I think we're all quite aware of that. We're excited about it, but to wait to add these lights even till next spring or the following year, in talking with Chris, our CFO, you know, during the Pebble meeting, obviously that's going to be more expensive than if we do it now as a change order with the work that's being done in construction, the rest of the tennis courts right now. So it costs us a little bit more now, but it saves us money down the road.
Okay. I wanted to follow up. I did have a conversation with Mayor Hala, and actually Director Beerbaum can comment on this, but the city has looked at their portion of their current programming at the tennis courts. The Parks and Rec Commission is recommending to City Council and to the leadership that they do not go into an agreement with us on the tennis courts. They believe that their programming can be taken place in other areas. But I did communicate with Mayor Hala that There is a desire on our part to have that opportunity for public use, and so we are looking at what are those ways that we try to manage that, and Jerry will provide some leadership and advice on that for us. I did also touch base with one of the neighbors on Eisenhower who had contacted us and just let them know that we are having these discussions and that we will ask staff to continue to keep them updated on what are reasonable expectations as we're looking at putting the lights in, and sounding like the softball and baseball noise and lighting has not caused too much of a disturbance. At least we are not getting much feedback on that. So those.
Well, and to be clear, so that people don't misconstrue, when we put these up, they're simply going to be used for school purposes. If the city decides to, in other words, for school purposes, there won't be a button that somebody can come on and turn on and flip on the lights and play tennis, other than for the high school team, that switch, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be in an enclosed, and public won't have access to that. Now, if we go into a 28E agreement with the city, and in the future, then that's something that will possibly be a situation where community members would be able to come and play beyond just school use.
So I think we better have Jerry come up for some clarification, because I don't have that understanding, Louis. So.
Right.
What I'm trying to include in the project is the flexibility to be able to choose whether we have the switch for the public or if we put it locked behind closed doors.
Correct.
So whatever the boards decide to do with respect to community use of the tennis court facility, I think if we get that policy established, then we have our working rules, and then we can work with that. So whatever you decide as a school board, I'm hoping that we'll be able to easily, without any additional costs or with minimal cost, be able to apply that.
It would seem reasonable to make it so that we could have it so the public could turn it on up to a certain time, and then it'd be timed that it couldn't be on after that, because although we think about it as the public, I would anticipate the public in many cases would be student athletes that want to practice at other times. So I think having the flexibility would be great, and then we can decide more of the details later on with the policy.
I think that'll be a good board discussion for later on.
I think the thing
that have to happen I'm sorry, Lisa, it's going to have to happen relatively soon. Jerry, you may have to update us on, as you're beginning to do the electrical work, at what point will the board need to be making a decision down the road here relative to public access or no public access, or how that's going to work?
Well, the electrical structure that we're putting in is going to give us that flexibility. So I don't think that there's any constraint on being able to make that decision on the public use.
Good point.
Now that we're going to go ahead and proceed with installing the lights, that's the significant decision that we needed to make here tonight.
Correct, correct. Tonight, all we're voting on is for school use of it. We can have a future discussion later on anything beyond that.
Right.
Yeah.
Really quick question, Jerry. Driving past this facility at night, it can be really busy. Do we have the parking capacity to have both baseball, softball, and tennis going on? I mean, what I'm thinking is, do we need to overflow parking capacity on the north side of the property? And we can evaluate that if it happens. I'm really concerned we don't have enough parking spaces.
Yeah, I share the same concern. When we had softball and baseball events here at the same time, that creates a real challenge with parking. When we first planned it and designed it, we based on the information, the input that we had, parking was going to be adequate. I'm not sure that we have much ability to expand, but I think we'll have to look at what free spaces there are in order to be able to add some more parking.
I'm just thinking on the north side, so north of the baseball fields, there's the spur that comes off, that there's land up there. I know it's our cross-country quote-unquote course, but
Yes.
we may have to evaluate that at some point.
Yeah, that, we'd have to look at that area as an option then too, yes.
Thanks for the information, Jerry. It's been moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. Item 20. SIAC goals.
I move the board approve the recommended SIAC goals.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Deerdorf. Discussion? I kind of gave an overview of the discussion last time about kind of how SIAC ended on these goals and then moved our discussion in another direction. But happy to field those questions, or Dan is here tonight and he can field questions. Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. Item 21.
I move the board approve the open enrollment applications as presented.
I second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. Items from the board.
I really enjoyed attending graduation as a representative of the school board. It's really neat being on the stage and seeing everybody so happy and smiling, and it's a neat perspective, and I love graduation. So I mentioned this to some of you. I was surprised to find that we weren't all dressed the same in our regalia. I was surprised to see it was different. I guess in my head I created this whole script that we would all be identical because we're all elected to the same office. And so I wondered about moving forward with next year, particularly as we're really focusing on equity, because what I don't want to do is have arbitrary distinctions drawn among us for no particular reasons. And I want any child sitting in they're not children, young adult sitting in the graduation area, or their families or younger siblings, to look up and be able to see themselves equally represented amongst the onstage representatives. And so I was going to, through the policy committee, propose a policy that we have matching regalia, and then let it come to the board for a discussion and a vote. Perhaps that's not necessary. Perhaps we can direct staff to do that. I didn't know if there would be consensus amongst us to do that. I just wanted to know what people's thoughts were.
I would agree with it. I mean,
This isn't a type of discussion. This is not a discussion.
Yeah. So we won't be able to discuss it. You can present information, and then if we desire to put it on a future agenda as a discussion item, we can.
Can I do that now? Can I move that we move it to an agenda item?
No.
No, but what can happen is two members of the board, yes, can request that it be put on a future agenda, or you can request that of those that will be in the next board agenda setting meeting.
So how do the two board members request it, if it's not through a motion?
Send me
Just
an
send me
email.
an email. Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Any other items from the board? I too will just emphasize that graduation is always a very rewarding event, and we really get a meaningful seat to be able to see it up close and in action. Items from the staff.
I wanted to share a thank you card that came to the board from the Boone County Fair Board for the donation of the bleachers. And they said they were very pleased with those. They're going to put those to use.
Could use them.
Yeah, Lisa has left, but I wanted her to actually share with you. I believe that the interviews are this week for the C&I director and also for the high school assistant principal as well as the elementary principal. They're all scheduled for this particular week, and I believe that the new superintendent, Jenny Reisner, will be Skyped in, I think, on the C&I interview, right, Carl? Also, I think last but not least is we do have some abuse investigators that will be coming back for recommendation at the next board meeting. And by abuse investigators, it's Iowa Code Chapter 104, where there is an allegation of abuse of a student by an employee of the district. And by Iowa Code, Darcy Cousins and I are abuse investigators, but if it goes to a level 2 because it's been founded, then it goes to a separate individual person who is neutral in the case to carry it out from that point. So that's the abuse investigator that we're really trying to bring forward. At that time, I believe Darcy will be coming back with a special ed update also. I wanted to thank the staff for hanging with us until 10:40, and Patrick, you too. All right. That's all.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Deerdorf. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you.